I think people's attitude to Scots has often been that it's not the language that you use in the schoolroom, as I've said, or in polite company. I think many people in Scotland have become bilingual almost. There's one language you use in one set of circumstances, and one language you might use at home or on the bus or on the street or with your granny or whatever. This poem I'm going to read now is by Elizabeth Burns, who's an award-winning Scottish poet. She doesn't usually write in Scots, but this is a poem about that very thing. It's called Grandmother, and it's about a grandmother who's moved away from Scotland and who used to speak Scots, and maybe doesn't speak Scots so much. So this is Grandmother by Elizabeth Burns. Grandmother. Grandmother carries the good Scots tongue in her head all the way to London, where it becomes like the kitchen china, worn and cracked with use, kept in the press with the girdle and the spurtle, the ashet and the gilly pan. The good china of English is what you bring out for visitors, kept in the credenza with a key in its lock. Lift it carefully onto the silver-plated tray. Remember which language you're speaking in. Dinna forget. I think that sums up the sort of two-way attitude we sometimes have to Scots. The Scots language is a phrase we use when we mean a number of dialects in Scotland. It's a very old language. At one point, several hundred years ago, it was the language of Scotland. It was spoken at the court. It was spoken by the kings and the queens. History has changed that. So Scots is no longer thought of as the main language of Scotland, of lowland Scotland. And it's had a fluctuating history. It's been a very popular language for creativity. There's been some great writing in Scots, great poetry and song, especially in Scots. But great novelists have used Scots to great advantage too. The situation today, I think, is that people are aware that some aspects of Scots are perhaps disappearing, and that maybe you need to go to your granny to find out what a good Scots word is. I think probably people speak more Scots than they realise. I think people in Scotland who speak English often pepper that with words that are Scots. And so we get words like crabbit and shilpit and shugly and puggled and all those sorts of words. Scots is very good for describing how people feel, and because it's such a good language, people use those words, but they probably don't think that they're Scots. What's interesting today is that in 2011, the census, for the very first time, will include a question in Scots. So people will be asked about whether they can speak Scots, whether they can read Scots, whether they can write Scots. So that's sort of recognising that in Scotland, Scots is still an important language. And I think Scots language activists would say that, you know, it is a very vibrant language still, and that there are plenty of opportunities for promoting it and making people more aware that it is such a colourful and useful, a very important language that's a very important part of our heritage.